A billionaire's empire was seconds away from being sealed in ink, until a maid's 12-year-old daughter opened her mouth and shattered everything. Harrison Blackwood, Chicago's ruthless real estate king, stood at the top of his glass tower, basking in the moment. His Japanese guest was ready to sign the contract that would secure a $500 million deal. The penthouse glittered with wealth, Italian rugs, priceless art, the skyline bending at his command. Everything was perfect. Everything was under his control, except for one small detail he hadn't noticed. In the corner, nearly swallowed by the opulence, stood Abigail Riley, just 12 years old, clutching her worn-out backpack like a shield. To Blackwood, she was invisible, just the maid's daughter, quiet, harmless, irrelevant, but Abigail's eyes weren't wandering. They were locked on the contract, on the Japanese characters printed neatly across the page. Her pulse quickened. She read them again, and again, until the truth burned so hot in her chest she could barely breathe. Then, with a voice that trembled, but cut through the silence like glass, she said, "That's not what it says." The room froze. The pen in the Japanese guest's hand hovered above the page. The air tightened. Blackwood's smile faltered, just slightly, but enough. In that single sentence, Abigail had cracked open a secret buried beneath years of lies. A $500 million empire, balanced on a single signature, now dangled over the edge of collapse. And the most terrifying part? Blackwood knew exactly what she had seen. A piece of paper could ruin them all. And only the maid's daughter knew it. 12-year-old Abigail clutched the strap of her frayed backpack as the elevator rose into the clouds. The marble floor beneath her shoes gleamed like it belonged to another world, one where she did not fit. When the doors slid open, the penthouse of Harrison Blackwood unfolded like a museum. Glass walls held back the sky, furniture looked too expensive to touch, and the air itself smelled of money, leather, perfume, and power. Beside her, Helen straightened her shoulders. She had raised Abigail alone since her husband's death 2 years earlier, working endless shifts as a maid. This was supposed to be her day off, but the agency offered a bonus to cover for a last-minute meeting. The pay wouldn't solve their debts, but she couldn't afford to say no. "Remember what we talked about," she whispered. "Stay in the kitchen. Don't touch anything. Don't speak unless spoken to." Abigail nodded. Inside her backpack, hidden between a water bottle and an apple, was her treasure, a worn paperback of Japanese folktales. Her grandfather had taught her the language, saying it was a key to honor and truth. The click of heels announced Eleanor Blackwood. She was elegant, sculpted from ice, her smile brittle and cold. One glance at Abigail and her lips curled. "I wasn't told you'd bring a child." Helen apologized, but Eleanor only waved her hand. "See that she's invisible." Preston Blackwood, lounging on the sofa, smirked at Abigail. "What's in the bag, crayons?" She flushed, clutching her backpack tighter. Helen whispered, "Ignore them. We do our work, we get paid, we go home." Soon the penthouse filled with guests. Harrison Blackwood, broad-shouldered and loud, welcomed Mr. Kenji Tanaka, the Japanese investor. Mr. Tanaka's quiet dignity clashed with Harrison's booming bravado. Preston mocked the aides, Eleanor flaunted their art, and Helen endured cruel whispers about her worn shoes. Abigail burned with anger. Her mother was the hardest worker she knew, yet to these people she was invisible. Then came the moment. Harrison unveiled the contract, a thick document printed in English and Japanese. He boasted it had been translated perfectly. He slid it toward Mr. Tanaka, eager for a signature. Abigail was nearby, clearing glasses, when her eyes drifted to the page. She hadn't meant to read it, but the Japanese characters were as familiar as her own name. Her grandfather's lessons echoed in her mind. The English was dense with legal terms, but the Japanese, something was wrong. Words twisted, meanings altered. A single phrase changed the entire deal, shifting ownership not as promised, but entirely to Blackwood's control. Her heart pounded. She was just a maid's daughter. She had been told to stay quiet, invisible. Yet here it was, a lie that could cheat honorable men of millions. She thought of her grandfather's voice, Geary, duty, honor. A person's word is sacred. Abigail's hands trembled on the tray. She knew if she spoke she could embarrass her mother, anger the Blackwoods, and be cast out. But if she stayed silent, men of honor would be deceived, and her mother's sacrifice would mean nothing. The room buzzed with anticipation. Harrison leaned forward, pen poised. Mr. Tanaka adjusted his glasses, about to sign. And Abigail, standing small and silent in the corner, took a breath, ready to decide whether to remain invisible or to speak the truth only she could see. The characters formed words, and the words formed a sentence that made Abby's blood run cold. Her breath caught in her chest. She stood frozen, eyes locked on the page. Her mother noticed and shot her a panicked look, a silent plea to move, to vanish into the kitchen. But Abby couldn't. Preston noticed first, his grin sharp and cruel. "What's the matter, little maid?" His voice carried across the room. "Trying to read the grown-up papers? No pictures in there for you." Laughter followed, a cruel chorus. Harrison Blackwood's fury was immediate. "Helen, get your child out of here." Helen rushed to her side, gripping her arm. "Abby, let's go," she whispered, desperate. But on the table, the golden fountain pen hovered above the signature line. Mr. Tanaka's poised hand was seconds from sealing the $500 million deal. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. "Honor is sacred. A lie destroys it." The pen touched paper. "That's not what it says," Abby whispered. The words detonated in the silence. Heads turned. Harrison's face darkened to a blotchy purple. Eleanor stiffened like stone. Preston's smirk froze. Helen's grip on her daughter's arm tightened in terror. Mr. Tanaka's hand stilled, his gaze turning toward the small girl in the faded t-shirt. The room held its breath. Harrison recovered first, his voice a low growl. "What did you just say?" "You're a maid's daughter. Be silent, or I'll throw you both out." Helen trembled. "She doesn't know what she's saying. She's just a child." "We'll go now," Eleanor sneered, "and forget your pay." But before they could move, Mr. Tanaka raised a hand. Instantly the room obeyed. He spoke softly in Japanese. His interpreter translated. "What did you say, little girl?" Preston scoffed. "She's 12. She can't even spell contract." "Stop wasting time." Associates chimed in, eager to please Harrison. But Tanaka ignored them. His dark eyes stayed fixed on Abby. Again, in Japanese. "What did you say?" Abby's heart pounded. She saw her mother's fear, the Blackwood's menace, the circle of mocking faces. Everything told her to stay invisible. But her grandfather's voice returned. "Truth is heavy, Abby. But regret is heavier." She pulled free of her mother's grasp, bowed slightly, and spoke in flawless Japanese. Her voice was steady. "I apologize for the interruption." The room froze. The interpreter gaped. Harrison's jaw dropped. Eleanor clutched her pearls. Preston's smirk vanished. For the first time, Mr. Tanaka's composure shifted, surprise, even respect in his eyes. He leaned forward and asked, "Who was your teacher?" Abby replied, "My grandfather. He said to understand a people, you must learn their language, not just their words." The balance of power shifted. The Blackwoods stood useless on the margins as a billionaire, and a maid's daughter conversed in Japanese. Harrison sputtered. "What is she saying, Clark?" The interpreter stammered. She's speaking fluently." Tanaka gestured to the contract. "You said it is not what it says." "Show me." Abby stepped forward, pointing to a clause. She read it aloud in Japanese, her voice ringing through the room. Then she translated. "It says that if markets fall by 5%, all of Tanaka's subsidiary assets will transfer to Blackwood Global." The English version hides it in vague words. The Japanese is clear. It's a trap. The silence that followed was crushing. Harrison's mask shattered. "Lies!" he bellowed. "She's making it up." "She's nothing. Her mother scrubs my floors." "You can't believe this!" His laugh rang hollow, but Tanaka wasn't looking at him. His eyes turned to the interpreter. He spoke a sharp command. Clark flinched, sweat streaming. At last he broke. He, Mr. Blackwood, paid me $20,000 to alter the translation. He said the Japanese wouldn't check closely, that they trusted the English. His voice broke. "I have a family. I needed the money." The confession struck like a hammer. Harrison's empire cracked in that instant, and the girl he had dismissed as invisible had exposed the truth that would destroy him. Harrison looked as if he'd been struck. His face drained to a pasty gray. "You sniveling idiot!" he shrieked at Clark, his voice cracking. "I'll ruin you. You'll never work again." Then he whirled on Helen, who stood frozen beside her daughter. "And you," he spat, advancing. "You're fired. You bring this lying little witch into my house to sabotage the biggest deal of my life? I'll blacklist you so thoroughly you won't find a job scrubbing floors in this city." His face loomed inches from Helen's, spittle flying. Abby stepped in front of her mother, small but defiant. "Don't talk to my mother like that," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Harrison roared, raising his hand. For one terrifying second, Abby thought he'd strike her. But a quiet figure moved, one of Mr. Tanaka's aides. He stepped between them, hand firm on Harrison's chest, his eyes cold with silent warning. Harrison faltered, confronted by the disgust on his guests' faces and the contempt in Tanaka's. The penthouse fell still, the city hum whispering through the glass. Mr. Tanaka's gaze softened as he turned to Abby. "You showed great courage, little one," he said gently. "Your mother should be very proud." He bowed slightly to Helen, whose trembling hands betrayed her shock. "You said your grandfather taught you honor. What was his name?" "Walter Riley," Abby whispered. Recognition flickered in Tanaka's eyes. "Riley." His voice thinned. "Did he speak of the war?" "All the time," Abby said, a sad smile forming. "He fought on Okinawa with the 77th Infantry Division." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tanaka inhaled sharply, his composure breaking. "My grandfather Satu Tanaka was there too." He rarely spoke of that island of ghosts. Except one story. He was wounded, left to die. An American GI found him, carried him to safety, cleaned his wound, and gave him a piece of chocolate. They shared no language, but shared their humanity. That soldier saved his life. He only knew the name on the helmet, Riley. Tanaka drew a worn leather wallet from his jacket and produced a faded photograph. Two boys in torn uniforms sat on rubble, one Japanese, one American. The American's kind eyes, youthful face, and jawline were unmistakable. Abby gasped. "Grandpa." Tanaka's voice thickened. He carried this photo all his life. "He told me, if you ever meet a Riley, treat him as family." His gaze shifted, icy now, to Harrison. "You tried to swindle me. But worse, you mocked and threatened the granddaughter of the man to whom my family owes its survival. The deal is off. This is no longer business. This is honor, and you have none." He turned his back, the ultimate dismissal. Bowing deeply to Abby and Helen, he said, "Miss Riley, Mrs. Riley, allow me to take you home." "Your grandfather's family is my family," Helen stammered. "We can take the bus." But Tanaka shook his head. "Nonsense. My car is waiting." Behind them, Harrison's empire crumbled. His voice broke into pleading. "Kenji, wait. We can fix this. Renegotiate. Name your price." Tanaka didn't turn. One aide stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood, all further communication will be through lawyers. You'll be hearing from us for attempted fraud." He faced the guests. "And remember what you saw today. The name Blackwood is now poison." The room shifted, associates edging toward the elevators, abandoning their former titan. Harrison, stripped of power, stood alone in the ruins of his reputation. And at the heart of it all was a girl in a faded t-shirt, carrying nothing but truth and her grandfather's honor. The Blackwoods' empire collapsed in real time. Eleanor's icy mask cracked, her face contorted with fury and fear. "You fool," she shrieked at Harrison. "You've ruined us." "I told you not to get greedy." She spun on Preston, her son shrinking beneath her glare. "And you couldn't stay quiet for one afternoon?" "Always with your stupid jokes." Preston's voice broke. "Me? Dad cooked the books. I didn't even know what was in the contract." The once mighty family tore itself apart in front of everyone, clawing at each other like frightened animals. No dignity, no control, just panic. Abby stood silently beside her mother, watching the family that had mocked them unravel. She felt no triumph, only sorrow. They had everything, yet nothing. Mr. Tanaka placed a protective hand on Helen's shoulder, steering her and Abby toward the elevator. As the doors opened, he paused, noticing Clark, the disgraced interpreter, weeping in a chair. Tanaka murmured to his aide, who placed a card on the table beside Clark. "Tell the truth, cooperate fully," the aide said flatly. "Honor can still be reclaimed. Perhaps work can be found again." "Far from here." Clark's tear-streaked face lit with disbelief. He clutched the card like salvation. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the chaos. When they opened into the lobby, a sleek black car waited outside. The chauffeur held the door. Helen froze, torn between instinctive humility and the foreign luxury before her. Abby squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom." Inside, the car was silent, soft leather swallowing them in comfort. Mr. Tanaka sat opposite, his voice gentle. "Your grandfather, Walter, did he ever receive the letters?" Abby frowned. "Letters?" Tanaka explained. His grandfather had written to find Walter, desperate to thank the man who had saved his life. No replies ever came. Perhaps the letters were lost? He made it home, Abby whispered. He never mentioned letters, but he always said, "You help people when they need it. Doesn't matter what uniform they wear." Tanaka smiled, eyes shining. That is exactly the man my grandfather described. He turned serious. "Mrs. Riley, you have a remarkable daughter. Brave, wise, you raised her well." Helen's eyes filled. "She's all I have. Harrison vowed to ruin you," Tanaka said softly. "I will not allow it. My family owes yours a debt of honor. Our foundation supports education. Abigail will have a full scholarship, any university anywhere. All expenses paid, and a stipend for you so she may study without burden." Helen gasped. "Sir, I can't accept—" "You must," Tanaka said firmly. "It is no gift. It is repayment. To refuse would dishonor us both." Their car turned onto the worn street where Helen and Abby lived. The sleek limousine stood like an alien among rusted cars and crumbling brick. Helen wept openly now, years of fear and debt dissolving into relief. She hugged Abby fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to Tanaka, but to fate, to her father, to the universe itself. Neighbors peeked from windows, stunned by the sight. Before leaving, Tanaka pressed a card into Helen's hand. "My assistant will call tomorrow. You need never work for people like the Blackwoods again. Your task now is to stand beside this extraordinary girl." He knelt, meeting Abby's eyes. "Your grandfather's spirit burns in you. Do not let this world dim it. My family is your family, always." With a bow, he returned to the waiting car, leaving Helen and Abby in the glow of a setting sun that suddenly felt brighter than it ever had. "Abigail Riley," Mr. Tanaka said, his voice steady and filled with respect. "You have his courage and his honor. Never lose that. The world has enough clever people. What it needs are more honorable ones." He bowed one last time before stepping into his car, which rolled away quietly, leaving Abby and her mother standing on the fading lit street. Their lives had changed forever. Abby looked up at their small apartment window. It was simple, but for the first time, it felt like home, not just a shelter, but a place of hope. The paper that could have destroyed them had instead set them free. The next morning, a call came from Mr. Tanaka's assistant, Emmy. Her voice was calm and kind. A trust was already being set up for Abby's education, and funds were deposited for Helen to clear debts and start fresh. "Your only job is to be a mother," Emmy said. When Helen hung up, she cried, not from despair, but from relief and gratitude. While the Riley women began rebuilding, the Blackwood empire collapsed. Mr. Tanaka needed no press conference. His silent withdrawal from the $500 million deal spoke louder than words. Soon, whispers of fraud became headlines. Blackwood's stock plummeted, investors fled, and their social circle abandoned them. Their empire, built on greed, crumbled to dust. Helen and Abby, meanwhile, moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment. It wasn't luxury, but to them it was a palace. Abby finally had her own room, sunlight streaming through a window beside an old oak. They placed a blue armchair by the living room window, a seat for her grandfather's memory. Life softened. Helen cooked again, laughter returned, and Abby thrived at her new school where she was judged not by her clothes, but by her mind. Mr. Tanaka remained present, calling monthly, asking about school and sending her Japanese classics. Abby, in return, shared stories of her grandfather, keeping his spirit alive across generations. A year later, Abby visited her grandfather's grave. Kneeling before the headstone, she laid chrysanthemums and whispered, "A lot has changed, Grandpa. We're doing good. You said honor is all we truly own. Now I understand." She thought of the Blackwoods, stripped of everything, and of her grandfather and Mr. Tanaka, whose honor had endured beyond time. Hand in hand, Abby and Helen walked away under the autumn sun. That night, Abby sat in the blue armchair, reading a tale of a samurai who gave everything for honor. Beyond the Chicago skyline, she no longer saw ambition and greed. She saw truth, courage, and a future shaped not by wealth, but by character. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was the guardian of her grandfather's legacy, and her story was only beginning.